When people think about indigenous people, they think of us like 500 years ago. They cannot accept that I listen to Kendrick Lamar. You know? They think I'm still dancing to the original flutes. Sure, I do. But I also listen to Kendrick Lamar. You know? So like people think like we're like, we need, for us to be accepted, we need to be 500 years ago.
This is Sherman, who's an indigenous chef who goes by the Sioux Chef and owns Owamni restaurant in Minneapolis. Javier Cabral, our editor-in-chief here at LA Taco, learned that he was in LA and invited him over to Odilia, Romero, and Poncho's house over in South Central so he could meet another indigenous chef, Poncho, and speak with Odilia, who runs a civil rights organization called Cielo, who looks out for Zapotec and indigenous here in Los Angeles. And these are the conversations and the takeaways from this amazing 4-hour conversation. This video has been edited for clarity and to bring some of the themes they've discussed closer together. Enjoy.
This is a world famous morcilla.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Thank you so much.
Habatakepe, Ampetuaste, Wambliwatakpe, Nichiape. My name is Sherman, and I'm coming from Minneapolis, Minnesota, and I'm excited to be here to have this chat today.
Padior Joshkrenle, Pajirenga, Shalocho Chipshundi, Shanak Chow, and Tubene Yeshunga. Not interpreting that. I was wondering when they were gonna fly by. LAPD's always out here. Always. What we're having is GMO-free corn.
Yeah.
From Oaxaca. We don't eat the red one, the red corn.
Okay.
But the people that we're working with that making the masa, they use the red corn. For us, the red corn is sacred. We don't eat it, period.
Oh yeah. Yeah, their red corn is typically ceremony and like weddings, like really special days.
Yeah, we don't eat it. Did you eat the red corn? No.
Yeah.
But you know people that are
put together with them.
yeah. See, they put it together in the altar.
Yeah.
But people like that don't know, they begin to just now sell it.
Oh yeah.
That's like the mother of all corns.
Yeah, it's like the Haudenosaunee. It's the same. It's like the same way.
See, they don't eat the red corn either. Only the Latinos decide to eat the red corn. Do you cook with bison?
Yeah, lots. Because we use like we make like a birria like with bison. And it's really good.
So you just make yourself a taco and eat it.
Okay.
Traditionally, this is how you eat it back home with a shot of mezcal or coffee.
Yeah.
But here they've added rice, and the latest request was to add macaroni. We're like, no, no.
Macaroni.
So most of Oaxaca eats barbacoa, but not this style.
Okay. It's good. Lots of flavor. Mm-hmm. Yeah, we've been just working with all this native corn from the U.S. And then not all of it was made for this kind of stuff, but we've been slowly figuring out how to make the masa, to make the tortillas with these different corns. It takes some time. Every corn's a little different,
But for us, like eating red corn for me is like, it's not comfortable.
Sure. Yeah.
Because this is like a very sacred corn for us.
Yeah.
It goes in our altar, and it's like the mother of all corns.
Yeah.
But I think for me, this is very clear of cultural appropriation, no?
Sure.
Because you're just eating corn because it's corn.
Yeah.
But you don't know the
You don't
meaning
have
for
the
each native.
connection.
You don't have the connection to what it means to each community and the sacredness of red corn. We have a relationship to corn.
Yeah.
And we have stories, oral histories of how many of us are made of corn, right? Especially in the South. Being Oaxacan is very digestible because Oaxaca está de moda, it's a trending topic. But being indigenous Zapotec is a whole nother issue, Being native is, it's very trendy. I'm native, okay, fine. But what about saying I'm Lakota and I oppose the pipelines? That's a whole different issue. You're not welcome there, Don't give me more wine. But really, how many people do you know that say, I'm indigenous Zapotec, I'm indigenous Mije? It's all about, I'm Oaxacan.
Right.
And being Oaxacan is very digestible.
Yeah.
But once you say, I'm Lakota and I stood against that black snake is not as, I'm just Lakota, you know? Things. There's the Pretendians. You guys get them a lot too, right? We get them. You know, people reconnecting, but they're like 100 years apart. But they do take a lot of space.
And I remember when I was little, my dad told me that white people will always say that their like great-great-great-grandmother was Cherokee, and they would always say Cherokee for some reason. And I was like, why would they say Cherokee? He's like, I don't know, that's just what they do. And then growing up in life, like that turned out to be true. Like everybody would say that they were like part Cherokee, particularly Cherokee.
I recently met somebody that suddenly has become Cherokee. And I'm like, oh, wait, I didn't know you were not Cherokee, but okay. Oh, the new trending topic for us on this side of the border, in post-border, is, I did my DNA and it comes out that 10% indigenous. And you're like, okay. I think you have to be linked to a community. Okay. You might not speak the language, but if you're able to go back home and, you know, they know who you are, you have a direct contact with the community here, for us, here and there, right? Because I get a lot of, no offense to the Chicanos here, but I get a lot of them like, why aren't we welcome in your spaces? Well, are you Zapotec? What pueblo do you belong to? Like, do you have a root back home? Are you involved in the community here? Are you down to abide by the rules of the community here? And they're like, oh, what rules? Because when you guys go back to the reservation, they know who you are, right? They know what clan you come from, what family you come from, who was your grandfather. But the pretending is very dangerous because they take a lot of spaces. Because this Indian with this color is not very welcome in many spaces, right? But that, in our case, from the South, you know, but if it's a Chicano identifying Indian, well, all the doors are open. So you're taking a space that don't belong to you, and you're not able to address the issues that we face as brown indigenous people. Language barriers, discrimination, low paying jobs because of the language, you know? So it's very dangerous. Well, Poncho, do you want to share like how often you ate meat back home?
Twice a year.
Twice a year?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. In the high fiesta, they invite you, of course, they're going to share a little piece, right? But no, when the neighbors kill a deer, you have a little piece.
Oh, yeah.
Because I grew up not eating meat. I mean, most of my childhood was no meat. Occasional, you will get the asiento from the beef, from the little, like, the leftover fat. And that was it. And if you had money, then you would go ahead and buy a piece of meat. But that changed with migration. Once the migrants were here, they were sending money, then everybody could afford meat, and it changed the whole diet. So there's like beans that are gone, that no longer exist because nobody ate them anymore. Like the nopales that they become just ignored in the community because now you're just eating that one nopal.
Right.
As opposed to when I grew up, there were like a variety of nopales, the wild wajes, as compared to the regular wajes that everybody knows, you know, because we're all here and we don't have access to anymore. So the pueblo kind of just became lonely. And with all the wild wajes and tomatoes, it just disappeared.
I mean, for like fry bread tacos, right? We just chose not to do that because it didn't have anything to do with us. It was food that was given to us as an oppression food, because the government, especially if you trace the history, it really starts from the long march of the Navajo, which was like in 1868, maybe something like that. I can't remember the year, but it's under President Lincoln. And then, but he, you know, as they're forcing the Navajo, like they're giving them some basic staples, but they showed them how to make a simple dough out of the flour, and they had lard, and they don't have ovens, so you just throw it in a pan and you make a fried bread, like a sopapilla kind of, right? And it becomes a staple food because that's all they have to survive like some of these long periods of time, is just like bags of flour and lard. Like that's it for staples, and because they're not allowed to go hunting, so this oppression food starts up, and people's, like, they grow up with it. Like, you know, all of a sudden you're talking about your mom's fried bread, then it's your grandma's fried bread, then it's your great-great-grandma's fried bread. You know, so it becomes a part of everything. But when you trace the history, it didn't have anything to do with us.
Yeah, no.
And it shouldn't identify all of us as native peoples anyways when it comes to the U.S. natives, because, like, all the U.S. natives love the fry bread because they just identify that as native food, but it's just not.
It was
That's
just
why-
so many similarities.
Oh yeah, so much commonality. And I see it with indigenous peoples everywhere, you know, but the first time I saw it was just living in Mexico. I just realized, like, oh, it just clicked. Like, I should be focused on my own heritage food, which I knew nothing about. You know, but it was all because I started just like researching the Huicholes and trying to understand what they were about, and then seeing so much commonality with their beadwork, with their artwork, with just like the connection to the plants and the stories and the religions and all the pieces, you know, and they just do all that beautiful stuff. And even like the Temescal, you know, because they have like the sweat ceremonies and things like that, which we shared so much in common. So like I just realized that we were just long distance cousins basically when it comes down to it.
Yeah.
And then just the shared history of all the trauma, and that's the other piece to it.
We trauma bond too, you know.
Yeah, exactly. I think for me, it just makes me more empowered of wanting to change things because I see a path of how to wake people up by just telling them the truth, you know. Yes, all these awful, horrible things have happened in the past and will continue to happen if we don't make some changes. Like, if we don't learn from the past, we're going to continue to see a lot of the same stuff. Colonization's still happening all over the globe, you know, whether it's like what's going on in Palestine or what's happening in Congo or what's happening, like we've been seeing all these indigenous communities in Brazil being cleared away for the sake of the forests, you know, just because they want to make money off of timber or whatever valuable minerals might be in the ground where those people have been living for countless generations, you know. So it's just colonization's never died. It's just in different forms. Some of it's the same form, but a lot of it's just everywhere, you know.
You know, a lot of people talk like colonization has ended, but I think colonization is at its max currently, you know.
Yeah. It's happening all over the place.
They're trying to take the last natural resources that we have as indigenous people, from the corn to the water to the regalia to anything that they could make money, and the food, right? ¿Quieres contestar por qué trabajas con maíz criollo?
Como vemos en muchos lugares, ¿no? Hay personas que han perdido la vida en estar luchando, defendiendo el maíz, luchando, defendiendo el agua. Que en estos momentos las grandes compañías que vienen a explotar el terreno de los pueblos indígenas. Y lo que queremos es que nuestra gente pues tenga poder y no dejar que nos traigan maíz de segunda mano.
Yeah, because those big companies, it's always land that they get first, but then they've been buying all the seeds and trying to like trademark them and trying to like make them their own, you know, because they just want to control.
Yeah.
And so it's important to try to keep the seeds in the hands of the indigenous communities, no matter whatever we can do to make that happen, you know, because it's going to be a constant battle because they'll just want to, if they find value in it, they'll want to take it, you know.
Indigenous people in California that work in the fields can't afford this food.
No.
You know, the people working in the restaurant industry locally here in Los Angeles can't afford to eat at the fine dining restaurants that they work with. No. So our own food is not accessible to the community. And there's something wrong with that. And we've kept the seeds, we've kept the knowledge, and we don't have access to this food. And how many people could shop at Whole Foods?
Right.
You know, or how many people could afford organic strawberries or GMO-free corn? I mean, that's not available to us anymore.
Absolutely. I would just say for like my restaurant, like I identified early on that the restaurant was never going to be a place for food relief or food access because restaurants are too expensive, you know, and it's a privilege to get to go to a restaurant because it's expensive because it costs a lot of money to run a restaurant, you know. But what restaurants do is it creates a lot of the jobs because we have a lot of employees that work at the restaurant and we're hiring a lot of indigenous peoples at the restaurant. And it's the place where we can because of our philosophy of how we purchase, we're just pushing so much money directly to indigenous food producers and raising that demand up. And it creates a place where we can have a strong voice, where people can come and learn and have a different perspective of how things work, you know. But I've also created a nonprofit on the side to address the things like the food access issues, because where I grew up on Pine Ridge, like it has been the poorest and one of the most rural, no food access places, you know, anywhere. Like, because we still have 70% unemployment in my community, and like when I was growing up, there was only one grocery store that covered an area the size of Connecticut, which is a huge space, you know, and there's just no food access. And but because we're native, we're just segregated out to be kind of out of sight, out of mind. But we have to like figure out ways to change that. How do we get our own foods back into our communities, you know? And how can we like turn the next generation on to understanding what their foods are? So a lot of education goes into it. And that's a big part of what we try to do, is just find solutions for food access and create access to education at the same time.
I completely agree with you. For example, he's in the food business. I'm in the advocacy. You know, our organization, Cielo, provides food over 5,000 indigenous people here locally that have been displaced.
Yeah.
Like, for example, how many indigenous chefs do we have? There's a lot of people that are chefs that are inspired by indigenous culture, but there's no room for you to be like, having Poncho and you here, it's, I mean, a miracle to see two indigenous chefs together, right?
Right.
Because it doesn't happen all the time. There aren't that many of you cooking.
No.
There aren't that many of you speaking for yourself as indigenous people, instead of just being, we got inspired by this dish because I went to a pueblo in Oaxaca.
Sure.
I'm like, sure.
Discovered it.
You just discovered more like, great, you know? You're like, wait, we're here.
Yeah.
Hello, you know?
Como Ponchos Tlayudas, en algunas veces, más de una vez, hablemos hoy en día, ¿no? Que Oaxaca está de moda. Oaxaca está de moda y todos sí quieren mezcal. Pero cuando invitan al evento y quieren comida oaxaqueña, quieren que uno les enseñe al chef del restaurante para que ellos vayan a servir allá. O sea, quieren la comida oaxaqueña, pero no quieren el que lo hace.
Yeah, and we've seen the same just working with native food, because people like, well, you know, they want me to cook a huge meal for everybody for like no money, like $2 per person or something,
Yeah.
you know? And it's like, it's a business, like this is one part of it, like, but we're also doing something bigger, you know, like we have to play some of this game to survive, you know, sometimes. And there's other ways we can go about. If people really need food relief, there's ways to go about food relief, you know. But when a business is a business, and you have to like make it sustainable somehow. And so you can't undervalue yourself is the biggest lesson to it. Like you have to be able to charge for what it's worth. And because nobody else is doing what they do, it should be a decent price, you know. So, but it's tough to play in the capitalistic rules with everything, because it's contradicts some of the values of wanting to feed everybody. But of course we have to survive at the same time, you know, and we have to set a precedent of how do we move forward. We can't be expected just to give away everything for free. You know, we have to be able to, again, never undervalue ourselves for what we do. And I think, again, it's like all about developing a philosophy that's going to be something bigger than you, because it's not about the ego personally, you know, it's about using the platform as a voice for everybody else, basically. So it's just about being smart about it, being intentional about it, and wanting to like help open more doors for other people to do the same work.
Absolutely. And also, like, you know, we don't think individually as indigenous people.
Right.
We think collectively.
Absolutely.
Like when we think about sustainability, we hold 80% of the world's natural resources as indigenous people. And according to data, the UN data, we're between like 10 and 15% of the world population. How do you explain that we keep those natural resources? You know, 80% of us, but also we're thinking about not us, but humanity needs to, what's going to happen when there's no more corn?
Absolutely.
When all the water's contaminated, when all the air is contaminated, what are we going to do, you know? So stop getting inspired by us, just join us in keeping us alive.
Yeah, but it's looking at the world through their different lens, because what my work was, what you guys had seen in like the talk that I gave, was the definition of decolonization was just comparing what is colonization and the values that it normalized to what indigenous peoples grow up with, which, like you said, some of it is a focus on individuality versus community, you know, and a connection to the earth compared to like destroying the earth for whatever valuable situations, and just the hierarchy of dehumanizing people of color, especially when it comes down to it, because they deem them as lesser, you know. So it's just like taking all those values and just looking at the two, and that's why we should be leaning as humanity towards a decolonized viewpoint of not this like colonized Eurocentric viewpoint that we've been just living in the world, that's created all over the place because of capitalism, imperialism, all these things, that we can look at the world differently because we can see how to take care of the earth, how to protect the water, which we're not being smart about as humans right now. Like there's still a lot of abuse happening to the earth, to the water, and like we have to figure out how to feed ourselves. We have to figure out how to make food for everybody, not just people who can afford the food, but like our entire communities, but also celebrating our diversities and holding on to what we have to understand the importance of all this beautiful diversity instead of trying to homogenize it across the board to make it the same.
The fact that him and I are here with Poncho today, the fact that I'm speaking Zapotec being in the US today, tells you that they failed miserably. That Sean is cooking indigenous food. They fail miserably. And that Poncho is having GMO corn and we're having GMO-free corn here at this table today. There's a lot of resistance.
Riquísimo. Y eso. Una hoja le cambia el sabor a la comida.
Tomato just disappeared. Your year Basanta is different because we talked with Vince
Yeah.
and he's like, oh, it's not the same. We could go see it.
Lots of water. Yeah. Okay.
Ahí está.
Okay.
So you just cut this part and take them. Well, thank you for being here. It was a pleasure having you, like sharing food, just like our ancestors. I'm sure they did because otherwise we wouldn't have like turquoise in Mesoamerica, right? I'm just making that up. But no, seriously, thank you for coming. It was a pleasure. I've been following your work through Poncho's Tlayudas account. But it was a pleasure having you, sharing our food with you, and hopefully we'll visit you soon.
Absolutely. Well, gracias. Yeah, I'm just grateful that we were able to make this connection, and I look forward to more conversations. But, you know, I've always seen so much connection to Indigenous peoples everywhere, especially in the Americas. So,
Yeah.
so we need to be at the table more often together.
Yes, absolutely. In Indian world,
O sea, 1000 litros.
you feed the earth first.
Okay.
So you do like the 4 directions.
Sí.
But I didn't even know where's north right now. So
Yeah, west is that way. So.
yeah, so you do the 4 directions before you even sip the mezcal.
Okay.
So cheers.
Que vivían allá en Santa Mónica.
Much love. Thank you, Poncho.
Cheers, of course.
Salud, 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 salud.
Salud.
Hello.